If you do any prospecting with LinkedIn, you have got to go get set up with Surf. That's SURFE. It's a tool you can use to add new contacts to your CRM system directly from LinkedIn in seconds. I'm using it every single day. I add contacts, follow my deals, keep track of notes, and it ends up saving me a bunch of time on prospecting and outreach, which means I can spend more time moving my deals along. The data is always 100% accurate since I don't have to copy and paste all the fields over from each and every contact that I want to put in my CRM. Instead, Surf does that all automatically with just one click in about 60 seconds. The team over at Surf has put together a very special offer for fans of sales players. There's a link down in the show notes, and you can use the promo code JWSurf5. Don't forget the E at the end of Surf. That's JWSurf5 for 5% off your first year. Don't spend another minute doing things manually. Go get set up with Surf. My guest today is Tim Zielinski. Tim is a regional vice president of strategic sales at Dynatrace. He's also the author of Sell with Swagger. Now, Tim comes on the show to talk about how he got started in the tech business. He actually started his career in a technical engineering role and then moved all around these different early stage SaaS startups to get a better business acumen and ultimately improve his ability to sell and understand the big picture behind the tech business. We get into some of the insights from his book, Sell with Swagger. I've got a link in the show notes if you're interested in picking up a copy. And overall, this is an amazing conversation filled with a lot of different takeaways that you can implement right away. So with that said, welcome, Tim, to the SaaS Sales Players. Tim, we are live. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. I'm honored to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. So first order of business on the show is my listeners always like to hear how you got into this crazy business of tech sales. Tell us the story of where you come from, how you landed in your current role, and of course, tell us what your current role is and what you're doing today would help also.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I actually studied computer science and I got a bachelor's degree in computer science. So I come from a nerd background, I guess you could say. And out of college, I was a programmer. I was a developer, Java programmer for a couple different startup companies. I also did like some web page development, web page design. And then I'd say in the first 2.5 years after college, I probably had 4 different jobs at different startups and whatnot as a programmer. I did some architect work also. And then I just got more interested in the business side of things. So,
interesting.
Yep. And I got contracted at another company and I got in tech support. So I was actually answering the phones on a technical product. And trying to solve customer complaints and problems and issues. And then I got into marketing from that with no marketing training, but I got into marketing because the product they were trying to market was very technical in nature. And they felt like they needed somebody that had the technical background. And then when I was in product marketing, I got over into online digital marketing, which is great because with that, you're trying to find, what email subject lines have a good response rate? What do you put in an email to get a good response rate? How do you attract an audience? So I learned all that, which really helps in sales. And then I got into an SDR role, inside sales, field sales. Then I became a regional director. So I managed about 6 field sales reps. And then now I'm a regional vice president of strategic acquisition sales across the US for Dynatrace.
So this is really cool. I've got a lot of follow-up questions on this, and something that I'm noting here is you've kind of run the gamut in the technology business. You've sat in a lot of different chairs and experienced a lot of different parts of what makes up a tech company. And one of the themes that I talk about a lot on the show, and something that I've observed for my own career and those of the highly successful reps that have come on the show, and of course my colleagues and counterparts who've done really well, is that they have experience wearing a lot of different hats in a tech company like that. Because what I think is the best reps end up are the best reps are actually just really good business people. They're good sellers, but they're great business people because they can understand how all the moving parts piece together and how that value can then be transferred to a prospect or, of course, a customer. So I think it's really cool that you did quite a few different turns in the business. I'm assuming this was all in pretty early stage startups, or were you at larger, software tech brands?
No, they were small. I mean, one of the companies was probably 40 people. They're both under 100 people. They were all
both
like
under 100.
Small groups. And I would say, like, to your point, I totally agree with that. I mean, when I got into sales, yes, I was hungry to close deals and do business and make money, but also I was coming at it from a different angle where I truly understood my customer and I truly understood their problems because I was selling to the people that I was. I was in IT. I was a developer, and people could tell that. So, just sometimes in our language, like some of the things I would say, this being a tech podcast, there's little techie buzzwords you can say that just make your audience feel like, oh, this guy knows me. Like, for instance, in my world, it's like JVM or .NET or Node.js or, all these technologies or Azure, AWS. Like, you start ripping off these technologies, or maybe it's something like Jenkins or things. And people can tell, like, you're really knowledgeable about the subject and you're not just a salesperson. And that's something I think really changed the game for me, because as soon as they see, when you come to them and they know you're a salesperson, just in their mind, whether they're consciously thinking it or subconsciously, usually it's subconsciously, they're like, this is a salesperson. They're just trying to get paid or take their wife on a trip to Europe, or they're just looking for the commission check and then they're gone. I'm not going to be able to get a hold of them anymore after they sell this deal.
Right.
But if they see you not as that and as like a consultant, like a trusted advisor, someone that can help me solve a business problem, the business and the deals, they just happen so much easier. And I feel like with my background, that really helped me achieve that trusted advisor status.
So I have this a little bit. I'm not from a technical background, although I did some night classes when I lived in Austin at the University of Texas in computer science, because after I got into the tech world, I thought I should probably at least understand how code works, right? And how, a website or a software application can come together. So I beefed that skill set up after I was already in, kind of a tech selling career. But what I do now is I sell to the contact center. So I sell to, customer service teams, and I started my career in customer service. So I have, similar to what you were saying, when you've been in tech support and you're selling to a tech support person, you have that authenticity that you just can't really get elsewhere unless you've done the job and been in the trenches. And I think it's been something that's really helped me and why I'm staying in sort of the category of SaaS that I'm in right now is because when I talk to my prospects, I convey that I know what I'm talking about because I did their job at one point. Right. And, that empathy comes out, that, ability to kind of talk the industry lingo and get very specific about knowing how their goals are measured and how they're measured as professionals really, really helps. I think for anyone listening out there, and I talk about this a lot. I actually just recently had another guest who had come from the hotel and hospitality industry, and she jumped into a SaaS company that sells to hotels and hospitality. So anytime, if you're a career transitioner or you're even in early career tech sales, try to leverage and parlay whatever your background has been in and see if you can sell a SaaS product back to the people that, were your peers or, were doing the same job that you've done in the past. I think that's really interesting. And I can imagine that your sales presentation is just so much different than even, others in your space, because you've got that, knowledge to back it all up. That's very cool.
And I would say too, like even amongst our sales engineers, they're usually the ones that do demos and help clients try our product. The sales engineers that come from being a customer, like they worked for the customers we're selling to, they just resonate so much more with the client base because they have real life stories of when they used our product to solve real problems. And that goes so far, because if you don't have that experience, the client is just thinking, oh, well, this is just what the salesperson thinks. This is just their hypothesis. They've never actually experienced it. But when you've got that real experience, it just resonates so much more with people.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to touch on too. So a lot of my listeners reach out and they're early in their sales careers or early in their technology careers. And in a lot of cases, they're transitioning from another industry, or maybe they're in their first like sales development representative role. And I hear a lot man, I've got to get myself to one of those top 5 tech companies, or I need to go work for this unicorn SaaS company that's out in San Francisco. Right. And I came from more of a startup background. So similar to yours, where you're talking, sub 100 employees. And I don't think that without having that experience, I wouldn't have been able to go and shadow, folks in different roles and developers and solutions and customer success and marketing. So I think, something to consider if you're out there thinking about how to build up your, quote unquote business experience in the tech business, do what Tim did, which is go to a, 40 person, sub 100 person startup where you can have the opportunity to wear a lot of hats. And even if you don't formally get those roles, it's a lot easier to go and shadow, your team members when you're less than 100 employees and you're all working in the same building, or, you're all in a small Slack channel for the company. It's a lot easier than when you go to these, big 10,000 plus person SaaS companies where it's just gonna be much harder to go and shadow someone on the marketing team without lots of bureaucracy. So I think that's, another thing I'm gathering from your experience is, had you gone and started your career at, I don't want to name any specific SaaS brands, but the ones I'm talking about, the ones that have raised, hundreds of millions of dollars and they're unicorns, it would have been probably a lot harder to go and do some of the things that you've done so far in your career.
Yeah. And I would say too, like, when I was coming from the tech background and I wanted to get in sales, people would always say, well, you're a techie, you can't do sales. You're going to have to, start out in telemarketing and it's going to take you a long time and blah, blah, blah. You need to have some sales classes experience and all that kind of stuff. They told me that, like, you can't do it, right? You're a programmer. And then I became really successful as a salesperson. And now people are like, well, of course you're successful because you were a programmer, you were a developer.
You know how the sausage gets made. Yeah,
exactly. I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways, right?
Right.
And some people always say to me too, like, well, you have an unfair advantage because you were a programmer. And I don't think you need to necessarily actually be your audience to sell better to them, but you certainly need to understand them. And I've seen some salespeople, like, as soon as the customer asks a technical question, they're like, I don't know the answer to any technical question. Let me get my engineer. Right. Like, the client understands for a lot of like deep technical stuff, you're going to need your sales engineer. But as a salesperson, you do need to understand at a high level what your product does and how it solves their business problems. You don't need to answer every tech question, but if you're also the one that can't really articulate some basic stuff, clients do look at you like, this person really doesn't understand their thing. I don't know if I can trust them on what they're saying. So you got to have some knowledge of what you're selling to have it be more sticky to people, to get them interested in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Would you ever go back to doing, development work and programming, or at this point are you the cat's out of the bag?
Yeah, I'm having too much fun what I'm doing. I mean, back then I liked being a programmer because it was solving business problems, but they were like small, minute problems. It was just me and my computer screen. Now I'm on the business side of things and I can solve much bigger problems that impact more people. So it's more fun now.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about, you made the transition through these different roles, particularly the tech role into, the being a technical or development role into being a seller. What were some of the things that you did to, jumpstart that part of your career, jumpstart the selling aspect of your career?
I mean, self-learning, I didn't go to college to learn a lot of these things. I always had the ambition and the drive, the grit, so to speak, which you definitely got to have that. And I was motivated by winning, and I was very competitive and wanted to make a lot of money. But certainly if I was in the car, I was listening to a podcast, or I had some kind of audio program on about sales. I used to have this CD pack, David Sandler, Best of David Sandler Sales Pack. I listened to those over and over. Books. I would read books. I would study. I mean, I talk about it in my book that I wrote. There's a chapter called Sharpen the Saw. And I dedicated a whole chapter to that because I do think it's so important. Yes, I worked my 8 to 5 business hours or whatever they were. Those were my like primetime selling hours. But outside of that, it's time for me to like sharpen my saw so I can be more effective as a seller. And that was going to seminars, getting a mentor to teach me stuff, like my manager, books, podcasts, all those things.
Love that. Yeah. So before we jump into your book, because I definitely want to talk about some of the insights that you've now put into writing yourself. Were there any were there any books written by others that really heavily influenced your trajectory into your sales career?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, one of them that I really liked was The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes.
I just recently read that one. It's dated in some ways because I think he talks about things like making sure to fax your order forms or whatever. But the principles in the book are timeless. And so I would recommend that for anybody. Just get past the sort of, references to fax machines or so some of the things are a little bit dated, but the principles themselves are actually really amazing.
Absolutely. You could say the same thing about David Sandler. I mean, I have the best of Sandler's CD pack, and some of those recordings are like 30 years old, 40 years old. But the principles, just like you're saying, the principles are the same. The techniques might be a little different because you might, we're selling tech and some of those people were selling other things, but the principles are the same. I would say another book, Mike Weinberg, New Sales Simplified. That's good. I really like Anthony Iannarino books. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Those are just some of the basic ones that come to mind.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So it sounds like, in you writing a book, you're in some ways probably scratching your own itch. And this is why I started the podcast, is because I consumed so many podcasts that I said I should put out my own podcast, because there's a specific, niche aspect of this industry that I want to be able to address. And if no one's going to do it, then I'm going to do it myself. So to that end, or, on that note, talk to us a little bit about the book and, what inspired it. And, everything from the title. You give us the skinny on the book. But I'd love to also hear sort of the creative process behind how you launched it and what gave you the idea for it.
Yeah. Kind of similar to you, what you said. I hate writing. I'm not a writer. I have friends that, every night before they go to bed, they'll journal for 15, 20 minutes. I tried that. I would rather chew and swallow broken glass than journal. It's not, it is just not my thing. It's very painful. And you read enough books and podcasts and people suggest things and they kind of stick with you. And I guess authoring a book is something that just stuck with me. It came up several times and I would hear that voice in the back of my head and I'd say, no, I hate writing. I'm not going to do that. No, I hate writing. I'm not going to do that. And my company then also had me start teaching little classes here and there. Like it might be a class on prospecting or closing a deal. And over time you start teaching that stuff. And it is very, very gratifying because some of those classes people would go to and they'd come back to me and they'd ask more questions. And they say, man, really, thanks for sharing that, putting that together. It was really valuable information. And you get a couple comments like that and you start feeling good. And you're like, man, maybe I do have some like good stuff to share. And the process of the book was really this voice in my head saying, you got to do it. I tried to write it a couple times and hated it, didn't like doing it. But over time, I just kept building up content through trainings I had done with my sales team or at my company Dynatrace. And eventually I got to the point where I'm like, look, this voice won't go away. It's been in the back of my head for years. People say, how long did it take to write the book? I say 7 years. Because I literally tried starting it then and I would stop and start. And then 2 years ago is when I really got serious. And I said, I have most of the content for the book in different places. I just got to organize it and put it together. And so 2 years ago is when I got serious. And, now it's been out for like 2.5 months or so.
This seems to be a pretty common theme with content creators. And in the big scheme of things, I'm pretty new to content creation, but I know from the time that I had the idea for the podcast, I think it was about a year that elapsed before I actually started trying to record, interviews like this. Right. And the biggest mental hurdle for anyone out there who's interested in producing content, whether that's as simple as, social media posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that, or something as lofty as writing a book, it's really the enemy is this mindset that, you're afraid of the criticism. I think that was, at least for me, it was, and maybe that wasn't the case for you, but I had this just big mental hurdle to get over of not feeling like I was adding anything new to the conversation or not worried that I was going to get a lot of feedback and criticism on what I put out. And once you can tune that voice out, however you have to do that, you can push past that and just start producing, your early content's not going to be great. I'm sure those early revisions of the book weren't, what you think was your best work, right? But kudos for getting, the product launched, right? Because that's it. That's the battle, is if you got to get something out there into the marketplace, into the, ether. And until you do that, it's all just gonna, be boiling around in your head. So that's cool to hear that you went through that. I mean, 7 years is a long time.
Well, sometimes I'll joke with people too, because they'll ask me questions on, what do you think about this? Or how do I do that? And how do I do that? And I'm like, well, that's why I wrote the book, because I got sick of answering that question so many times. Now I can just say, go to this page of the book, read it, and, saves me a lot of time.
So the book's called Sell with Swagger, the quick hit guide to crushing your quota. Tell us maybe give us the elevator pitch. Why should I think about picking up the book? What's sort of the primary theme, and maybe what makes it different from some of the other sales books out there?
Yep. I think number one, I wrote it for salespeople. And to me, every salesperson has ADD.
Yeah, that's so true.
We have ADD so bad. So I thought about that. And then also a lot of salespeople I know, they just don't read books. They listen to Audible because they struggle reading. It's a lot of books are long and deep. They go really deep into a topic. And my book was written for salespeople who have ADD. So the chapters are very short and consumable. A lot of the chapters are maybe a page or two, and then it has an action item. So each chapter is summarized with an action item that says, okay, here was the idea from the chapter. Do this, build this into your practice, make it a habit, so to speak, and it will help you be more successful as a salesperson. So it's broken down like that. And it's also meant to be a book where you could dive in at any point. Like, let's just say somebody picked the book up and opened it right in the middle. Yeah. You'd be able to read 2 pages and get something out of it because the chapters are short and there's an actionable item there. So, yeah, and that was it. And it's funny too, when I wrote it, like people were like, what's the goal? What's the goal? What's the goal? How many books you want to sell? Do you want to do a speaking career? I'm like, no, I just want to get this voice to stop talking to me in my head that I need to write the book. So literally writing the book and getting it out was really the goal. And hopefully some salespeople get some value out of it.
Yeah. Now, so you may have already said this and I missed it. Salesperson ADHD coming in. Was it self-published, or did you get a publisher to work with you on it?
I got a publisher, Lioncrest.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's great. And it's available on Amazon. Is there a direct website where reps can pick up the book?
I didn't build a website. It's just it's on Amazon. Yep, it's the only place.
Cool. I'm going to drop the link. Yeah, I'm going to drop the link to this. I've got the page here on Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to go take a look at the book. And looks like you got a couple of versions here. It's a hard copy and a paperback version. If you had to summarize one of the most important pieces in the book for sellers, maybe that's a chapter, maybe that's a quote, something in the book itself, what would that be? The number one most important thing in your mind? And I know it's probably hard to boil it down to one. That's a tough question, but
no, it's a good question. I know what I'm going to say, and most salespeople aren't going to like it, but I would say time management, because the role of a salesperson is so many things. You have to be somebody that can prospect. You got to be good at calling people, voicemails, handling objections. You got to know how to close deals. You got to know how to make deals bigger. You got to work with your partners, whether that's like an SDR or a sales engineer. You got to know your tech. You got to know your product well enough to sell it. I mean, there's just so many things. And then also like with management, you got to update your CRM, Salesforce. You got to be able to forecast. It is a tough job that most people can't do it. Most people don't want to do it because it is that difficult. The reason I say time management is I feel like a lot of people, because they have ADD in sales, they just kind of run around with like a chicken with their head cut off all day. And I get it. There is so much to do and you can be so busy. But in sales, if you don't manage your time well, you're going to burn out, first off. You're going to burn yourself out, and you're not going to want to be in sales anymore. But if you truly manage your time and say, what are the most important things I need to do today? For instance, prospecting. We're in sales. Prospecting is a huge thing. I find this happens all the time. People say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do my prospecting. And they come into the office and they check their email. They get busy. A customer calls them, they got to handle that issue. Then their boss calls them, hey, you need to update the CRM, get in Salesforce, do your updates. And then, you know, a bunch of other things go on through the day. And then it gets to the end of the day, like 4 o'clock. And you're like, shoot, I said I was going to do my prospecting today. The day just got away from me. You know what? I'll just do my prospecting tomorrow. I mean, that to me is a perfect example of not being good with time management, because prospecting, if we don't do that, we don't have a pipeline. We don't have any deals to close. So, but someone that's good at time management, they block time in their calendar to do the important things. And if you do the important things, I think in sales, you're always going to be successful. But there's so much to do. Sometimes people are busy, but being busy doesn't mean you're going to be successful in sales.
Oh, that's amazing. That it's so true. And I think, you know, to summarize too, something that you're pointing out here is the importance of consistency, because this is a game of consistency, just like anything else in life. If you want to, you know, go get in shape or something, if you want to, you know, create a product or write a book, like it's not so much about, you know, big heroic efforts once a week. It's about like small dailies that compound over a long period of time. And in your, you know, in your example, that those dailies are blocking time to do your prospecting, and not just blocking it on your calendar. Because by the way, I've also been guilty of blocking, you know, an hour for prospecting and then, you know, finding myself at the 45-minute mark of that block, having done nothing yet. So it's about also holding yourself accountable to those time blocks and, you know, truing up at the end of the day and saying, okay, I had that blocked in my calendar for an hour. Did I actually make the calls? Did I actually do the research on this account? Did I actually reach out to the prospects at my targets? Right. So I think that's fantastic. What kind of advice in the book do you give sellers to help be more accountable? Or is there anything, you know, in the book that kind of speaks to how you can get more, you know, get more on target with that, or to get more in sync on that with yourself?
I think
basically.
there's at least 3 chapters that go into detail on how I like structured my day. I used to do time blocking. And then using tasks to figure out what are your top priorities. So it's in the book, and I think most people will read it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I don't think anybody's going to read the book and be like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest idea that's never been talked about before.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything like that in the book. It's more, you know, I heard this one time and I think it's so true. It's more important to be reminded than instructed. Sure. Which I think at the end of the day, we all know what we should do and what to do to be successful in sales. It's just sometimes we forget, or we get busy and we don't do what's important. So I think the book is more of those reminders of what and how you do it. But I would say, just going back to your question, it's really about like time blocking and being disciplined. Because if I go back to my example on the prospecting, that's another thing some people do is they maybe say, okay, I'm going to block out 60 minutes for prospecting, and they get going. And then 15 minutes into it, they get a text, or, hey, somebody just replied to me on LinkedIn. I better go. I just got an email up there. Let me go chase that. I mean, there are so many distractions. If somebody can really block their time and be focused on a single task and an output, that I don't know. That to me is really what helped me be successful.
That I'm going to soundbite, because I'm not going to be able to recap what you just said about reminders, but that's a topic I've thought about a lot, which is, for example, my best sales managers didn't necessarily teach me anything new or revolutionary about sales, but they were really good at reminding me of the fundamentals, because that's where, so I don't know how you worded that, but that was perfect. And I've been thinking about that a lot, which is, it's not about the revolutionary information. It's not about the novel stuff. It's about just always going back to those same fundamentals and being reminded over and over again. And I think the manager example hopefully, you know, showcases that. But I think, you know, on a personal level, going back to some of the basic concepts, and, you know, when you pick up a new sales book, it isn't necessarily about finding that silver bullet, right? I think a lot of us want to believe that there's some magic out there or silver bullet out there that's going to help us level up in some way, but it's less about that and more about, you know, repetition of concepts, reminders to your, you know, to the way you said it. So that's amazing.
Well, it's like, I don't know. We always want to chase the new shiny object. What's the new like thing I can do to change things up? And I've read books on Vince Lombardi. I'm sure many people have heard of him, but he was the famous Green Bay Packers football coach. And even a lot of football coaches today, they just say, we're going to focus on blocking and tackling, because at the end of the day, that's what football is. But Vince Lombardi, I love what he used to say, and I'm going to just paraphrase because I don't know it exactly, but he would talk about like the halfback sweep. And that was a play that his teams always ran. And I think it was an interview or something, reporter was like, well, you can't just keep running that play, because eventually other teams are going to pick up on it and they're going to know how to expose it, and it's not going to work. And Vince Lombardi would say, we are going to practice that play so many times and know it so well inside and out. It doesn't matter if I told the other team we're about ready to run the halfback sweep, he's like, it wouldn't matter, because we know that play so well. We will run it and it will work. And that's to me sales. It's like we always want the new quick and easy way, but it's the basic blocking and tackling type stuff. And like you said, it's being reminded most of the time. We all know how to do this stuff. We all know we should do it. It's just maybe we haven't built it into our daily practice, or it's not a habit yet, or maybe we used to do it and we forgot and we went down a different track.
That's great. That's great. What's one big thing that you see a lot of reps doing incorrectly, whether that's, and obviously don't call out anybody on your specific team, but maybe industry wide. Yeah. You don't have to call out any specific names, but what are some things that you see are kind of big faux pas in the space right now that are an easy fix for sellers?
And maybe it's just because we were talking about it, but I think time management is a big one. That's just, it's huge. At least in my role right now, like my sellers are very focused on pipeline generation, PG, finding opportunities. And that requires a discipline of sending out lots of emails, doing the cold calls. I know the phone is scary. It has teeth. It's hairy. It's ugly. You don't want to pick it up. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's one of the best vehicles to find opportunities and get conversations going. And it's also the tough work, right? So if you don't block your calendar and really be disciplined on, okay, I'm going to do this many dials, or I'm going to do this many emails, a lot of times you could be busy and just not do that. And you can fill up a whole day of 8 hours, but if you're not doing the activities that are going to lead to you being successful and hitting your quota, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's, I think you're exactly right. The time management, being consistent, holding yourself accountable to what your targets are, and taking that accountability into your own business, because that's, again, just like anything else that you want to achieve in life. It's a game of compounding, and results come with time and effort and consistency, not from, big heroic out of the blue efforts, right? There's very few bluebirds in the tech sales world in the big scheme of things. They do happen, but most success comes from that consistent output.
Well, I think time management allows you to focus on the important things. And I've heard it talked about with light, right? Like light's a powerful force. It moves very quickly, all those things, but it only becomes really powerful when it's focused. And focused light is a laser, and lasers can cut diamonds,
right?
But it has to be focused light. And to me, that's really what the time management allows you to do. It's focusing you on the most important activities that are going to get you to the result you want.
That's a cool analogy. I like that a lot. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I could say I made it up, but I'm sure I stole it from some book somewhere.
Well, Tim, what's next from here? So you're leading a team. You've got the book out. Are we to expect a road show or a seminar tour or something like that here in the future, or maybe a course or something along those lines?
I don't know. I mean, at this point, I'm just happy I have the book out, and I haven't really pursued anything else. And I love what I do at Dynatrace. So at this point, no speaking tour, no follow on. But if people come to me and request it, who knows? I might be something that I'm interested in. We'll see, I guess.
So I like your approach because it's very similar to mine. A lot of people ask, okay, you got the podcast going, you've been doing it for a couple of years now. When can we expect the world tour? Or when are you going to be on stage with so-and-so at, when are you going to put out like a retreat somewhere in the mountains where everyone can go and I don't know, like meditate and learn about sales. I'm not opposed to doing these things, by the way. I would love to do something like that. I did my first kind of micro meetup recently. But when I set out to do this, I wanted to more just again, to kind of your same vision, put something out there and have something out there, not really knowing where it was going to take me. And I'm glad so far at some of the opportunities that have come to me personally from having content out there in the market. And I'm sure you're feeling the same way. But I think it's okay for anyone out there listening who wants to just, produce something, to not have to have some kind of end game with it. It doesn't have to be $1 billion business someday, right? You don't have to become the next Tony Robbins or whoever, name the, influencer on social media. But I think you can have content that supports your personal brand. And if that personal brand only serves to help you close more deals in your individual contributor role, awesome. That mission accomplished, right? And if it opens up, speaking gigs and road shows and retreats in the mountains and Tony Robbins stuff, even better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, somewhere in the middle of that is a nice side hustle that produces some extra cash that you can put away to take your family on a trip or, put into the stock market or whatever you want to do with it. Right. So I think it's really cool. I like your approach. I think, a lot of reps can learn from what you're doing, which is if you've got ideas and you have, knowledge floating around in your brain, put it to paper, like you said, consolidate it all in one place and just put that out there, and you just never really know what doors are going to open from that. So I think your approach is awesome. I'm excited to check out the book myself. Where can my listeners get in touch with you if they want to?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Just look up Tim Zielinski, and I'm probably one of the few Tim Zielinskis in Cleveland, Ohio.
Nice.
I work at Dynatrace, so they should be able to find it.
Yeah. And I'll post your profile link in the show notes. Any final words of wisdom for the listeners out there relating to sales, business, the tech business, life in general? We'd appreciate any words of wisdom you can impart on us.
Yeah, I guess I'd say two things. As you were just talking there, I mean, I totally agree on the approach and why I create content. And another reason why I wrote the book is I felt like in my sales career, I kind of had to fumble through and figure things out. So, I've read hundreds of books, podcasts, just putting all this information together. And then to me, it was like, I took years figuring all that out and spending that time. Why don't I bubble it down into a book of, to me, the important points that I pulled out so somebody can decrease the time, right? For instance, if it took me 10 years to learn all this stuff, somebody else could read my book and maybe learn it in a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
So hopefully people see the book like that. And then, secondly, to your question at the end, I think being successful in SaaS sales is huge. I mean, it's been such an amazing career. I think it's the pharmaceutical sales reps of 15 years ago. What I mean by that is like, that was the gig. 15, 20 years ago, being a pharmaceutical sales rep was the gig. That's what everybody wanted to do. I think now SaaS enterprise software is where you want to be. I mean, you can make a ton of money. You can work from home. You can get out. You can do cool events. Like I've done different sporting events and things. You can travel. Man, I love it. I wouldn't change my career path at all. I'm just so fortunate to have ended up where I did, from a dorky programmer to a salesperson. But I love it. It's a great career path, and you can make a difference to people. I think software and computers and tech, I look at it like that with my customers. It's all about selling them something and helping them implement something that can save them time, which ultimately, if it saves them time, they can spend more time with their family, eat dinner at home. So I look at it like that, and it's something that I can feel good about.
I'm 100% with you there. It's an amazing lifestyle. And for anyone out there listening who's not yet in the business, just keep at it. It's going to, you're going to find something, it'll land someday. And, it's worth the effort. It really is. To your point, it opens up so many doors. It, solves a lot of problems in the business world. And I think I got a good idea for what I'm going to name this podcast, from dorky programmer to swagger-based seller. I'm just kidding. Something like that might be kind of fun. Tim, this has been a great conversation. I seriously can't wait to check out Sell with Swagger. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights with the audience, and hope to have you back on soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Jesse.